Very good afternoon to everyone. I am Dr. Vijay, Dean School of Law at UPS. UPS is a multidisciplinary university with a purpose to create global professionals who bring laurels to our country. Welcome you all for today's webinar on a very important topic, women leaders in law. We are privileged to have amongst us eminent panelists who represent the breadth of legal profession. Let me give you a brief introduction. Ms. Talish Ray is one of the founding partners at TRS Law Offices. She did her education from prestigious institutions like La Martinique Girls College, the Lady Shri Ram College, and Delhi University, where she studied law. She has worked extensively with young entrepreneurs and corporate houses, individual clients, and not-for-profit organizations. She has appeared before Supreme Court of India, as well as various high courts and tribunals across the country. Her work includes complex commercial litigations, corporate restructuring, general advisory, and policy work. She continues to serve as an associate with the Faculty of Law, University of Tasmania. And she spearheads the very acclaimed girlsgottano.in, which has, in a short span of time, become a leading resource for early stage intervention for young girls and women and their social and legal rights. So let's welcome Ms. Talish as Woman of Steel, as awarded by NewsX in 2019 for her pioneering work. Welcome, Talish.
Thank you for having me.
Next, we have Ms. Arya Tripathi. Arya graduated from prestigious Hidayatullah University. Arya has a role as Principal Associate at PSA Legal Counselors, practices in the area of general, corporate, commercial, and M&A, TMT and data protection, labor and industrial laws, healthcare and pharma, environmental laws. She has conducted data protection trainings for leading IT and ITS multinational companies, organized roundtable sessions, and spoken at public forums on comparative data protection jurisprudence. She is a member of Society of Women Lawyers, India, IPBA, and contributes as part of ICC Task Force on Arbitration of Climate Change related disputes. Welcome, Arya, to the webinar. We have another panelist, Dr. Gitanjali Chandra, who is a professional turned academician based out in Dubai with more than 19 years of experience. Dr. Gitanjali heads the law program and is an author who actively engages herself in research in the areas of international human rights, corporate laws, international business laws, and international environmental laws. One of the unique work areas include writing case studies and research papers on halal tourism, halal cosmetics, zones in UAE. We find that Dr. Chandra is having some issues with her connection. She will be joining us shortly. Still, we welcome her virtually. Dr. Chandra, welcome to the webinar. I would like to provide you a reason, why we chose this particular topic, today's topic, women leaders in law. Actually, we wanted this webinar to provide motivation and visualization of success possible in the areas of law for girls aspiring to join legal profession and remove any apprehensions they may have through the conversation with our esteemed panelists. Without further ado, I would now turn out to our panelists for their opening comments. And what I would request is, if you could just delve upon while giving your opening comments as to what inspired you to become a legal professional and your journey towards it, including challenges. So if we may begin with Ms. Talish Ray.
Thank you, Professor Singh, for having me, and for all of those that you're. First of all, please stay safe and remember that you have a responsibility towards the community of ensuring that you follow safety standards, including social distancing, as well as wearing a mask. And please ensure that you are following all instructions given by government at this point in time to curtail this disease. So to start with your question, Dr. Singh, and I was thinking about it because for as long as I remember, I've wanted to be a lawyer. And if you can I was trying to go back to the exact moment when I wanted to become a lawyer. I grew up in very small towns. I grew up in cities that are not even on the map, possibly even on Google Map today, right? So very small tehsils, very small districts in Uttar Pradesh. But one thing that I remember, and I went through a large number of schools, in the early school years, one of the things that would be there on the school would be a portrait of Mahatma Gandhi. And additionally, I remember, without even knowing that it was Mahatma Gandhi, I also remember seeing it on a currency note. And I remember asking someone, saying, why is he there? And whoever it was at the other end turned around and said, well, so is Abraham Lincoln on the US currency note. And what occurred to me was that both of them were lawyers. And in that sense, I continue to be a Gandhian. I strongly believe in that philosophy. And that's exactly what inspired me to get into law. In terms of the challenges, I think the challenges were from the time when I joined law. Law was not exactly the kind of image that it enjoys today with the youngsters. The branding that it enjoys today was not there. I mean, you had to, when you told people you wanted to do law, the first reaction that would come in is, but why? You're good in studies. Why would you want to do law? That was a standard thing at that point in time. So my challenge was first being able to convince my family that law is something that I wanted to do. Then I think at the second stage that the challenge that came in was the fact that I did not come in from a legal background. So literally, I didn't know anything to start with when law. There are law colleges, you enrolled in them, and then after that things were left out on their own. So the challenge of not coming from a background of lawyers to be able to then work through that and gain the information, because a lot of information in law is something that today 5-year law schools such as yours actually equip students for that, but in our time it was not done. And then at each stage there were different challenges. For example, when I passed out of Campus Law Center, there was no system of active placements. So to get your first job, you literally had to and there was no LinkedIn at that point in time. So you had to actually figure out who you wanted to be with. You had to figure out on the basis of newspaper and other information, then apply for a job, then convince them that yes, you need a job, but you also need to be paid for that job. So I think that was there. So at various stages, the challenges have been different, but they've also been very enjoyable challenges, because they've often, made it a very fun ride in that sense. So that's my brief background into how I got into law and what the challenges are. So I'll leave it at that. And when, of course, as we continue talking, we'll take you through some more of my journey.
That's wonderfully said. And one thing which I pick up from your talk is challenges gives you opportunity. So that is what you have seen. So all these particular challenges you sought as an opportunity, and I completely agree with this particular proposition. We welcome Dr. Geetanjali Chandra to the webinar. Madam, welcome. And the question which I posed to the panelists was that how did you choose this particular career, and any challenges which you faced while reaching to this particular stage for our audience?
Thank you, Dr. Vijay. Thank you for the question as well. And thank you the other panelists and the students and the audience which are hearing me. So I was hearing about the other panelists' challenges. It is somehow the same rocky roads, bumpy thing, because I'm from generation, like you can say I'm from Generation X. So I has faced more problems in that way, because it's not different from any other part of the world. It is in the same for the practicing. As other challenges, how I joined this profession, it is also, as she rightly mentioned about, that I have joined as when nothing is there, you have to join. That's the, like, if you're not good in study, so there is no option left. So that has to be study. But actually, I was inspired. One of my judges, Mr. Vikram Singh Jadsa, that's like he was a neighbor to me, and I saw the books. I fascinated with the big library, and he was a district judge and retired district judge at that point of time. So that's inspired me to join that. And he used to say me the good stories about liberalism, womanhood, and these kind of things, and which inspire me always to be a leader.
That's great. So that is quite an interesting point given by you. And as you say, Generation X, I don't think that any one of us now belongs to Generation X. Everybody is moving towards Generation Z. But truly speaking, Arya is from Generation Z.
Yes.
And she represents the young professionals, and I am very proud about her achievements, what she has done, for many reasons. And one of the reasons that I had a proud privilege of being in her classroom. So it always gives you that kind of a pleasure. So Arya, over to you with your thought process. I have already seen some thought process, but I would like to hear you and for our audience.
Thank you so much. My experience has not been a very conscious choice. I have never been motivated to be a lawyer or consciously decided that I want to be a lawyer. But I must say that I am naturally suitable for acting as a lawyer. And I want to tell this to everybody who is listening that you should not force yourself to be a lawyer if you naturally don't feel aligned to it. So after I completed my 12th and I took a year off to actually figure out what I want to do. And that wasn't like a conscious effort whether I want to continue my normal graduation studies or go abroad or do whatever. There was no conscious career trajectory. It was more just getting aligned with what are my strengths and what are my weaknesses. And I realized that one of my strengths is I'm extremely analytical. I have a brain that loves analyzing even the most mundane things happening around. I also realized that my strength is that I am extremely, extremely resilient. I really want to give a fight, a good fight for a thing that I truly, truly believe. At the weakness side, I realized that I could be hot headed. I could lose my cool very quickly. And also, I realized that I could be deeply affected and be extremely empathetic towards various factors. And when I put my strengths and weaknesses, and I have all done this all my life, I have a very fruitful habit of writing stuff, things that make sense to me, things that don't make sense to me, good things, bad things, pros, cons. I am always willing to do that exercise for anyone, for myself, and just up there. And having done that analysis, there were only two fits that actually came into place. One was journalism and one was to be a lawyer. And journalism, I thought I couldn't do, to be very honest, because I somehow, nothing to say, I think just reading newspapers itself, and if you're constantly in a habit of reading newspaper, you start seeing, how news gets reported. And it doesn't no longer stand as the fourth pillar of Indian democracy. That's my personal view, and it has been there for good now 15, 16 years, that I do not believe that the media or journalism does its rightful due to a democracy of 1.3 billion. So I thought lawyer makes a lot of sense. But I really think that initially when I joined the profession, I thought it's about courtroom, it's about going and arguing your matter, it's about fighting for the right cause. So that's just a perception that law students, when they join law school, they do have. But my only thing is that you should be open-minded, because law is cross-disciplinary. Law is a benchmark from where you can actually move into various dimensions. You can move into journalism, you can move into policy, you can move into politics, you can do a lot of things. You can be an activist, you can do a lot of other things. Just by you can be a civil servant. How do I forget that? A lot of people join law school because they want to be civil servants. So I had that open mind that I'm not joining law school because I know I want to be a litigating lawyer. I always had that open mind. And in process, I allowed myself to evolve, get used to the finer challenges. I did not have many challenges, I would be very honest. Thankfully, my parents were able to afford education in a national law school. So I didn't have a student loan. But at the same time, I had same challenges that any first generation lawyer would have. But I would like to tell this, that we have a huge family, and I, being the first lawyer in my family, none of the male members have been lawyers. None of my cousins or my sisters have been lawyers. But after I joined law school, my own younger sister, my maternal side, my mother's side, there, the daughter's there, my paternal side, and now we have actually 7 women lawyers in our family. So I personally think that charity and culture begins at home, and you should start thinking why you want to be a lawyer, just in the right perspective, that it is absolutely personally fulfilling. Forget about the grandiose idea. Look at being as a lawyer as a personally fulfilling journey.
That's inspiring, Arya, and many things which I came to know for the first time. That's great. And yeah, that's a great, interesting story and an inspiring story. And I must tell to the young generation lawyers who are thinking that they are first generation and nobody is there in their family, and particularly girls. I believe it is a very great inspiration for them that they can set the mark for them and the future lawyers to come in their family, particularly the girls. That's great. Thanks a lot, Arya, for that insight. And if I may say, education across levels is the best form of empowerment that can be extended to women to positively impact the state of their being, their status and position in the society, and build a solid foundation for their holistic growth and development. With an aim to create an ecosystem that empowers women and equip them with knowledge, skill, and self-confidence, UPS has declared the year 2020 as the year of girl empowerment. With the vision to provide a fillip to women empowerment through formal higher education, UPS through Project Shakti will offer 25% scholarship on tuition fees to all girl students for the complete program duration, seeking admission starting with the academic year 2020. I'm happy that Ms. Talish is here, and she was part of the event wherein we declared this thing in a grand event in Delhi. So, Ms. Talish, I would like to hear you on this point, and also you have appeared before the Supreme Court of India as well as the various high courts and tribunals across the country. What is your opinion about having more women leaders in the profession?
Right. So I do remember the UPS Shakti launch, and in fact, I am very, very impressed by the initiative that has been taken by the university. I think it's important to keep in mind that women represent 50% of population anywhere in the world. And in order for women to be able to take on the challenges as they go further, you need structural changes and you need structural approaches for them to get on to higher education. Now, we do know that while education has been made compulsory, right to education has been made compulsory till the age of 14, but post that we see a lot of women who drop out. And offering an incentive, that to a financial incentive like this, which is a whopping 25% off your tuition fee, is something that is likely to encourage women to get in more. And the more women get educated, there's an old saying that goes, if you want to educate a community, then you have to get hold of the women and educate them, because they're also in some ways, rightly or wrongly, deemed as the caretakers of the future generation. And because of that, the influence of women when they have that level of education is completely different in terms of, rather than having women who drop out. Having said that, I think it's also important because we are seeing this trajectory that has sort of been built up, wherein we see that education has become fairly expensive. And there is that very Hobson's choice that is offered around the fact that would you like to invest in the education of women. So therefore, you need these sort of structural, systematic changes to come about to change that entire paradox of having all girls who've been given the right to education, yet they're not getting into further higher education. Now, in terms of, what do I feel about more women leaders, both at the bar and the bench? It's my firm belief that when you bring women on the table or in the room anywhere, you tend to change the discourse altogether. And what do I mean by that? It means that naturally when I go in for a due diligence, I do, even without realizing that it's a part of the executive sheet, in my head there is already a diversity number that is doing it to see how things are placed out. Similarly, when you have more and more women on the bench, then you see that the nature of judgments change. Now, this is where I think, again, in India, there's a bit of a paradox where you have this entire thing that has come up where we have the right to vote without a suffragette movement that ever took place. As a result, a lot of the times I see people tend to take women's empowerment very casually. वो तो हो जाएगा, because there's always a government scheme, there's always the government pushing it, there's always you have educationists who have stood up and said that. But having said that, I think it's important to realize that it doesn't come out naturally on its own. When you hear about path trail breakers, whether it is in the field of medicine like Dr. Anandi Joshi, or you hear about women lawyers like Dr. Leela Seth, you sort of realize that their challenges are the reasons why people like us can actually walk that course easier. So there is, of course, no going back on the fact that we have people who are leaders on the bench who have managed to change the way the laws of the country have been. You can see how our judgments have evolved from whether it's the highest courts or even today in terms of the courts giving out judgments, a lot of them has been the impact and the work of the women who have been there at the bar. But I also give a small, differentiation here, which is to say that just by merely having women in the bar, does it make things easier? Maybe not, because you see, patriarchy can be a philosophy, and if patriarchy is a philosophy, then you can have any of the genders co-opted into it. So you can have women who are also of a very patriarchal bent of mind. But averagely, what I've seen is that if you want to change the discourse, if you want certain things to actually come in, and those could be minor things on a day-on-day level, which is that I found that maybe because of the way that they're groomed or cultured, or the gender culture that comes in very early into improving the employee conscious that you have, which is going to be there in, if you were to go into a company which has a lot more women that are there. Similarly for the bar or the bench, in terms of how they look at issues and how they discuss issues, and points on which examination of issues are dealt with. There's definitely a lot that is added by the women that are there. So there's a case to be made in terms of how it goes along in the future as well. But having said that, again, it also needs to be borne in mind that a lot of the times, when we think of law, we tend to think of it as a career. Now, what is a career? Now, Dr. Singh, you'd be aware, as are my fellow panelists, a career typically goes in the sense that you join a job by the time you're 24, you're going to be out by the time you're 60, and that's it. Now, this is where law is very, very different. It's my, learning from this profession that I am going to be working for as long as I'm going to be breathing. There is no retirement age, which basically means that if I'm to look at it at the age of 40, I can averagely look forward to another 40 years of my career. Therefore, I've just about started. Now, that is the sort of, outlook one needs to take, that it's not going to be there, which is why it makes it very difficult. Because I remember when I was very early on as a junior in the profession, I'd see a lot of my other schoolmates, batchmates, those that had done their fancy degrees were already on to their first jobs. And remember, those are the times when Economic Times used to carry so-and-so got a 6-figure salary or a 7-figure salary. And I'd be like, hey, mujhe to kuch bhi nahi milta hai is naukri mein. But at the same point in time, the realization that came in that our gestation period is very, going to be here and now. It's not on an everyday basis that you see that, you're going to make an increment or things are going to improve. Then suddenly one fine day you look back and say, my gosh, you covered so much ground. And since you covered so much ground, you realize there's so much more to be done as well. And those parameters don't apply. So in that sense, I think it needs to be borne in mind especially for the ladies who plan to join the bar or the bench or the legal profession, that this is a sphere that has a very long gestational period. It's not exactly a profession. I mean, law can be your life. Otherwise, career, I think it becomes a bit of a problem, because most of us who are in law tend to live it, breathe it, exist in it every day. As Arya was saying, you sort of examine it from all features. You look at it in every, putting it earlier, you have to be inspired. You have to keep inspiring. So that's the holistic outlook that needs to be taken where law is concerned.
Very well said, and quite comprehensively explained this concept that the profession is not for a limited period. It goes till you want to this particular profession to go. And quite an interesting thought for the young leaders who want to make their life in law. They have to have a look at this, that it is not for a limited period, it is for a longer period. They have to just realize that they have to move there. In one of the articles I was reading, which highlighted that the banking and finance, insurance and competition laws emerge as a most female-friendly, I will quote this, practice areas. And one of the students also asked this particular thing, whether there is such kind of a categorization. So my question is to Arya, and I have seen your work profile. You work in quite a number of areas, and including the difficult area of IT sector. That is what I see, which is gaining prominence right now. What is your opinion on this categorization, and how do you see women technology lawyers?
I think it's a very interesting question, and if I may just start with an anecdote. So I don't know if people follow the space of robotics very keenly, but I do, because I'm just fascinated by the idea of robots and artificial intelligence. And I find it sometimes very challenging because it's a human creation that can go either way. It's just like the Murphy's Law. A robot could be used on a war field, and a robot could be used. The last book that I was reading is called Exhalation, where the robot is actually a nanny taking care of a small baby and making sure that the baby is getting fed on a regular fixed time. So what I'm trying to get at is when I look at all of these aspects, a lot of the debate in how technology as a commodity, how technology as a governance tool, how technology as a public usage and right. Let's, for example, talk about internet shutdown in Kashmir. Now, as a public utility, access to internet and technology. So all of these aspects, when I see is, when you see how the law evolves or how the jurisprudence around it is evolving, there is a definite gap in whether any other gender's voice has been, factored in. It's just, it looks like, okay, 40% of it has probably accounted other genders and 60% of it has accounted a very, very stereotypical prevalent mindset. Now, I want to give an illustration that I just recently faced. So we did a filing with the government before the lockdown, and the law requires us that within 5 days, you have to come and give me the filing in physical paper. And as it may happen, the lockdown happened, all movements restricted, no facilities, nothing. And for a woman, actually, I personally felt like as a woman, maybe I do not know how to drive, or true for a man also, I wouldn't deny that. But the moment you call up and I spoke to the officials explaining them this problem, I could definitely sense that they're like, madam, aap to drive karke bhi aa sakte ho na. I was like, how does it? And it wasn't in a way that he was genuinely concerned whether I can drive and come. It was more in the sense that, yeah, you can drive, and there was this jibe that, okay, women drivers are miserable. So what I'm trying to say that probably sometimes it is important that women are accounted for in every which way, not just law, but while even developing technology. There is a wide prevalent notion, oh, women technology lawyers, they don't understand technology at all. And that's entirely incorrect. Now, I have been thrown off at, like, I keep going to technology law conferences, and I have been the subject matter of friendly taunts or jibes or whatever you call it, which I don't find friendly at all, on whether I understand technology or not. So there is a tendency that needs to be called down, because it's not true that only men can be engineers, or it's not true that only women are supposed to do banking and finance, or and trust me, banking and finance also has gone through a diametrically opposite shift, because earlier it was considered that women are absolutely not fit for entrepreneurs, women are absolutely not fit for managing finances, not good at numbers, not good with money. All of that has taken time to change. So if today anybody says banking, finance, corporate, and allied commercial laws, where you don't go to courts or you don't litigate, or competition laws are the best fit for women, I refuse that idea. I think the idea has to be what you think is you are a right fit for. There is nobody, there cannot be a teacher, there cannot be a colleague, there cannot be anybody who tells you that you are a right fit for this thing. You have to do it on your own. You take opinions. Opinions are always welcome. But what I want to say is that do not go by what people or a majority say. That's called herd mentality. I am a strong believer in knowing and realizing, okay, I am getting into this. This is how I'm going to do it. Knowing everything in and out of that situation. Technology law was never taught to us when I was in law school. Nobody cared about technology law. In fact, the country doesn't have protection law. And today I take some amount of pride that I get invited to speak on technology and data protection aspects. I work with Niti Aayog, I work with the government, I send white papers. So when I do this, I mean, if I would have stuck to the idea that I'll only do corporate laws, which was my initial start of my career, I got a big fat check for being a general corporate lawyer. If I would have stuck to it, I would have been like having no problem in my life, but I think it would have been less fulfilling. So, and that's one thing that I wanted to tell you, that the deciding factor in law school for me was the last year that, okay, what should I be doing? Do I litigate or do I join a corporate firm? And I got deterred in not joining litigation because I personally felt that I'm a first generation lawyer. I don't know where I'm going to stay in Delhi. My parents, my household, everything is somewhere else. I'm going to move from law school to Delhi. I don't know where to stay, what sort of lifestyle I would have. Everything was there. And I am guilty of taking an easier path initially. But to be very honest, I think people should realize what they are good at. There is no bar. You have to make your space. Even in banking and finance, there are various subtle ways of gender bias and discrimination. And as women get smarter, women realize those subtler forms of bias and gender discrimination, where you are in a office, if you are in a boardroom and suddenly all the men stand up when a woman walks up, it may not be because they are all courteous and all gentlemen. It's all because there is a silent body language also that, okay, you are different from who we are. You are a different gender and you do not probably compare better with us. So take it with a pinch of salt, but definitely don't go by what you read. Try and live your expertise.
That's great, Arya, and that is quite interesting thoughts you brought up. And what I picked two things, and one of our students asked this, that whether litigation could be the right choice for women. You already answered that you regret not being choosing it, and I also believe, you know, litigation is something which is a career which actually gives you the maximum fulfillment, because I did briefing for that particular period, and I believe that that provides you that kind of a fulfillment. That's great. And never you know, stop from dreaming high. That is something which is very, very important. At UPS, I can say technology lawyers, and I have seen this because we run a BTech LLB program, and that is a 6-year program, one of the unique programs run in the country. And I find many of the girls choosing that particular program doing excellent well. And I have responses from them in the classroom. I find they have quite great understanding of technology. And who says that women cannot understand technology? I think that is completely a myth, and which you have broken already. So that is great. Let me now turn to Dr. Geetanjali, and Dr. Geetanjali would like to hear from you as to the role of women and whether this has been, I think we can continue this discussion, and whether this has been stereotyped for particular set of job description. Like you can be a teacher or do a family law practice, should be away from criminal law practice, etc. What is your take on this?
Thank you, Dr. Vijay. Actually, I was listening to both the panelists and I thought like how the technology and all these things are, that's Arya is very rightly said that what are the stereotype things, like you should not think about the stereotype, that this generation has to think. And I can give my example. When nobody in India has thought of to start a law college in India, law college outside India. And when I was in the college, when I came with the dream of like teaching in the management, and this is the first law college of India, outside India, that the Bar Council has approved. And we don't have the idea how we are going to handle the court visits and all these things. And these are some of the challenges we never thought of, what kind of law we are teaching, what kind of things, what kind of jurisdictions is apply. Does we have to familiar with the local laws of UAE, what are the language, because the language is a barrier. So these are some of the things we never thought of, but I have taken up as a challenge in this, like in the middle ages of my, this middle age. And second thing is, one, like when I start teaching in like as interdisciplinary things, like which Arya has mentioned, interdisciplinary things actually teach me a lot, and I'm still learning so many things. Because see, the thing is, I'm working with, I had recently written a case study. I'll give an example of case study. That case study is related to some entrepreneur, how they are dealing with the situation. So being from a lawyer or a political view, when you are doing a SWOT analysis, and I don't want to feel left out, and I have chosen that profession in that way. Okay, case law came from Harvard Law School, and they are adopted, the Harvard Business School has adopted this, and this is our idea. This is law acumen. So I can take up as a challenge, and I started. Second thing, which reminds me about space imagery, which recently I have written a paper on it, that is a Scopus Index paper. space imagery and related to the legal issues and concern. It's because as Arya mentioned about all this thing, so I remember my drones paper. So I'm writing a drones paper and legal implication of drones. What should be the limitation? The cyber resiliation nation UAE, because I'm right now in Dubai. So I have to choose some different things which are very uncommon in India, but we have to be thinking that way, because as a generation, if I have to be cope up with the generation and I have to be tuned with the generation, we have to upgrade ourselves. So technology is one thing which I felt, and I'm trying, and I love to say that, like, so our student, like UPS, I like UPS for a reason, because BTech and law, that's combination rarely I found and I have heard. And whenever University of Petroleum and Energy comes to my mind, it is a BTech combination and the law. And I always very curious, what is the course outline of that? Because how they are teaching and how they are evolving, these are the same laws, oil related, gas related laws they are teaching, or some new things they are teaching, because I never get the chance to, if I get the chance, I'll take admission again to read all these things, the new things evolving. So as we are, every day we are evolving. If I say my PhD in sexual violence against working women, my book is on public interest. So always like the Aryas, what Aryas is saying, I can relate it, because see, I keep myself open. I start with litigation, came like practice for some years, then joined judiciary. Then I later find that I have to do something for the young generation and all this. So team is one of the way, because I love students. I love to be young. I love to be with them. So that makes me to, and I'm very passionate about, okay, what I can do. See, these are the problem, but every problem has a solution if the problem exists. What we face, it is, if I have faced some challenges, it's not necessarily that you are going to face the same challenges. You have new challenges. So I learn from my student when they are coming with the challenges or the admission, and we are in this stage when somebody comes for admission. I used to sit with the admission, like the team and all. So I come to know whenever they're asking some question, it's a difficult time when you have to decide whether student has to believe in himself, that they have to understand that what they are doing is right. If they actually take the decision on that phase, what Arya has, like, I can relate it with it, because see, if you have decided, you are going to do it. If you have not decided and half-heartedly, sometimes students comes and they are saying, my parents want that. If your parents want, just try to convince your parent. If you are not able to convince your parent, you are not able to convince your client. So this is you are in a wrong place, boss. So these are some of the things which in a simple way I understood by the experience, and every day I'm evolving in the sense that it's the most powerful profession. I feel elevated. I feel it's in some profession, money you can make in any profession. It's not only about that. It's important as charity and all this thing. If you have a back pocket is full, you can do anything. But the thing is, same time, when you feel like satisfaction when you are helping someone, when you had someone is in distress, and for a women are always compassionate. They have the power of convince others. They have that compassion to be empower others, and they are the one who have an ear to hear. So that is very much required for this profession, and they have the power of adaptation. They are very adaptive in nature. When they are going to other family home, they can adapt easily. Man can't do that, but female can do that. They can adapt the family. They can consider them as like mother, father, children. These are some of the inherent, the organic quality of a woman. So what I personally feel, that this profession is meant for either you are doing any degree. I don't have any problem which admission you are taking, if it is a BTech, medical, like you have to have a degree of law, have to have a sense of your, like, try to write and draw to understand. You have to understand the structure of the society. You have to, when we were talking about, as I forget the name of other panelists, Trihla, I think the other panelist name. So when she mentioned about the patriarchal structure, so it needs power. if it comes to men, if it comes to women, it's going to be, it has to be a balance. That balance is required. And when women come as a leader into the profession, and that is very much required, but yes, all the power with the balance and all the powers, and to understand that you have to, if you have certain fears, certain things, you will not progress in any profession. But if you come with the ownership, if you come with this thing, if you come with determination, and that is a very inherent qualities of women, I can say, as a, for any profession, I find it, it's not because I'm in legal profession, but yes, I find it because I'm from science background and came to law. So that is a totally different area of that. But actually, I can join the profession of pharmacy, I can join the profession of law, but I had chosen law because I feel that satisfaction, that persuasiveness, that resilience, I have that quality of which I can relate with Arya for that. So that's the thing actually I find in myself. And gradually, it's not today I have taken this decision, tomorrow I can't. You can take any decision, but you have to, you had meant for, like if you see in Hindu mythology, we call Shakti. We had that already empire, we had to just realize that. And that's within us. So that's from my side, which I feel about, and this is something which I always love to, that women have all power, they have to recognize, they have to internalize. It is, institutionalization is something which is happening, but you have to internalize, it is the other people also have to internalize, that you have to, it is an inherent quality of to be decide right and wrong, that you have to understand. That's why the best profession which I felt that has to, whether you opted as a profession or not, you have to know the law, you have to understand your power, you have to decide, you have to tell your son that what is right and wrong. At least for that, you have to know the law, you have to understand the women. If you understand the women, if you are able to understand, you understand yourself, you can able to understand, to teach your son that this is thing, society will automatically change. So that this is a kind of a vantage, a viewpoint to see the progress of the society, the culture. The society will improve, the society will progress if like you can understand the legal profession is one of the important profession, which I always feel is the best profession and the best education we can give it to our daughters. That's I can say from my side.
That's great thought, Dr. Gitanjali. What a wonderful, elocution, and you have actually summed up a lot of things. And I must say that there are a lot of things between the lines as well, and people have to actually get that particular sense of it, what you are meaning from these terms which you mentioned. And I'm completely up with your idea that there has to be at least basic advocacy on the rights of rights and duties of people, not only women, I believe all citizens
Yes.
in the country. And that is something which is very, very important. I am seeing in the question answer box, and I am looking at the questions, and I am already looking that there is a huge fan base of our speakers there, and I would like to increase this particular fan base further. And if I may talk about a bit on hobbies part of it, what happens is generally we talk about education, and in these seminars we'll talk about it. But what I observe very clearly is, and I have seen, and I have plenty of girl students, and in fact, in our university, we have a very decent ratio, I must tell the panelists, that it is almost 50%. And in terms of faculty, if I look at the ratio, it is about 60-65% is female faculty. So that actually, gives me an opportunity to observe and look at it. And I find that women are quite good at their hobbies, and what they do it with so much of passion and so much of interest, and they give compassion to it. This is something which I would like to learn from women, if I have to learn. It is not always, women have to learn from men or other vice versa, but I am just giving my experience on this account. So I find Talish runs a very interesting walk, and when recently I went to Cambridge and did a walk, and there also there was a woman who did her law, and she was conducting that particular walk. I could instantly relate. So that is one which you do, and it is quite successful, I find. And the other one is You are open water diver as well as black belt. I think it is quite a lot. So would you like to tell something on this count to our participants as to how very much it is important to cultivate a hobby in this profession?
Oh, actually, it didn't. So let me take it step by step. So, like I said, initially, I grew up in very small places where even having a swimming pool was a privilege. In fact, I think it was only when my father was posted to the city of Lucknow and Banaras that we actually saw a swimming pool, because the other places wouldn't have that. And I don't know if many of in the audience would not recall, but in the 80s, Doordarshan used to have this phenomenal service where we got TV only for 2 hours. And in the 2 hours was in the evening. But on Sunday mornings was a peculiar time when Sir David Attenborough would come and talk. And there was a series called The Wonders of the Sea. So I remember sitting there and saying, if I get anywhere in life, I am going to go deep sea diving. Now, the bigger issue about that was that I couldn't learn swimming till the age of 37. And I learned swimming only so that I could get into diving. So that was one of the things that really motivated me to sort of move forward. It was one of those goalposts that I always kept in mind, saying that I would like to be a deep sea diver. I'm also a certified skydiver, which I did mostly on a lark. This was to celebrate a birthday where I landed up and said, I do want to jump off the plane to see what the adrenaline rush is. And I think a large part of it as lawyers is the fact that, we keep some part of ourselves towards things that we do which can take away the stress. Look, I'm not going to make this sound easier than that is. If you're a practicing lawyer, especially if you're a litigating plus corporate lawyer, it basically means that you see a lot of stress. You are going into court. There are times when people's lives, their properties, their belief systems are being challenged. You see that, and there has to be a way where you can get out of it. Then, of course, there is what you were mentioning is a project called Talish Ka Tehlnama. This is because I did history when I was in college. And it's one of the things that outside of a law book, you will only find me with a history book. And when my children reached school, I realized that their attitude towards history was generally that it's a boring subject. And I thought that is ridiculous, because history is one of those things that sort of gives you a grasp over the ability to predict how humans have interacted with their environment again and again in similar circumstances. And it's very predictable if you were to look at it. I mean, for example, today, when you look at a lot of theories that are coming around as to what's going to happen post-COVID-19, we're looking at the Spanish flu, which was about 100 years back. So we can reasonably preempt as to what was the impact of the Spanish flu versus what is going to be the impact of COVID. So that's how I started with that, with a bunch of, and I do it only for little children. I do it, it's known as a parent-child history walk. I do sometimes, of course, people have been very kind. So there have been people, representatives of other states, there have been educationists that have come in, but it's mostly, the idea is to be able to walk around. And I enjoy walking amongst historical monuments. I don't have a thing for nature. I can't commune with nature too much. I find forests to be sort of, I find them eerily upsetting in that sense. So I like historical places. That's how it started. But I think it's important for anyone who wants to be a lawyer. There are a few things that you have to keep in mind. One is the fact that, law demands very long hours of sitting in one place and concentrating. Now that obviously means that physically we give up on our fitness. And like I do a lot of ratios in that sense. And I think that is common for most lawyers, that we start examining what is around us. And I said, if one of the ratios that came out to me was that a lot of lawyers suffer from ill health and die early, which is to say by their 50s, they are either hampered by some sort of spinal health issue. So you see a lot of lawyers wearing collars because they can't, there's a spinal issue and they've not worked it around. And that's how I actually took up Taekwondo. I got a black belt in that, but that was mostly to keep up with physical health, because it's important for all of us. Your body is the only thing that you have only one of outside of time. So don't waste time and don't waste your body. These are the two things that should be very, very precious. So given that, I think that's where it comes in about juggling things. And that's something that comes very naturally to a lawyer, because one moment you will see that Dr. Singh, and I'm sure Arya and Dr. Chandra, you've also seen it. One moment you're like right into it. You're talking about cutting edge technology or cutting edge medical, patent research that is there. The other end, you're suddenly coming in and you're looking at something in CRPC or a criminal bail provision, which you know from the back of your finger. So I think that comes very naturally when you become a lawyer and you sort of do that more as allowing your mental palate to develop under more and more circumstances. So that's how I actually took it up. And I have a habit as a lawyer in order to develop it into a level where it can be something that can be put on in terms of the community. So that is something that we've sort of kept a balance on, though there's a lot of joke that runs around the fact that how do you manage all this? And this is again one thing that I found when I was very young, when I read about it, which is the fact that, you know, if you want to find somebody to do something, then find the busiest person. And that's why I've seen that a lot of lawyers, you will see, we've always had a tradition of that. So whether it is Ambedkar, who was writing and doing far more than just writing the Constitution, which was a humongous task, to all the other senior lawyers that you meet around in the field, almost all of them are likely to be very actively engaged as well as pursuing things towards a different level of excellence. And that's something that I'd encourage anybody who's getting even at a student stage. Always have that one area of passion outside of law, because law is, as it is, so demanding. And then eventually you find yourself getting into a space where you find yourself being overwhelmed by law. So much so that, I mean, I think lawyers, that's a joke in my house, that when my children ask me whether they can watch television or not, my first answer is it depends. And that's so classically a lawyer's response. So you find law can sort of end up taking up your life, and therefore it's very important to play around all of these other things. But physical health is one, and the second part of it is, of course, mental health. I think that is what sort of keeps you going. I think it keeps every one of us, and it definitely keeps me going there.
That is quite inspiring, and in fact, it inspires me as well, Talish, and would be definitely having a separate chat with you to get motivated on this particular count. I believe it is quite interesting, and I know history is interesting, and it helps you in your anything. And as Dr. Chandra pointed out, you know, whatever you read, surrounding circumstances, because law is such a field which requires all kinds of information. So whatever information you gain always comes handy at one point in time, and it helps you. So Arya, a difficult question for you. In fact, that is basis compassion, and Dr. Chandra also pointed out this word on compassion. So I just wanted to ask, and I'm looking at the disputes and dispute settlement. And when we say compassion naturally comes to women, so how this is important in legal profession, because you have dealt with number of clients, and how do you see this is a plus point and it is an advantage, particularly in commercial disputes? And now when we are talking about mediation, arbitration, and you deal with arbitration as well. So if you can throw some light on this. I am conscious about time, and I think we're exceeding a time bit. With permission of our panelists, if we can extend a bit, because it is getting interesting, and I have 2-3 questions left. So we will continue with this. So Arya, over to you.
Thank you for the question. And it's just not about a dispute setup or when you're looking into disputes. I think what women lawyers bring onto the table, what I'm not saying men lawyers can't be, because I'm increasingly seeing a new wave of men lawyers whom I call male champions. And I have all fuel in my armor to actually explain who are male champions. But first I'll take up the question what women bring in and how it is important. Women bring in something that men are not evolutionarily capable of. It is called being efficient multitaskers. Men have a thing of focusing on one thing at one point, and women have been known from stone ages to be multitaskers. They're women who are basically looking after kids, cooking, doing things, entertaining, looking after parents. So women are multitaskers. Now, what happens when you multitask? And let me just break out the bubble here. Lawyers have to be multitaskers. It cannot be that you will be given a sweet span of time, that you have a day, you have all the jurisprudence to evaluate, you have all the facts to evaluate. You will have to, quickly finish it with diligence and at the same time juggle it with another mail coming your way. Or if you're doing a transaction, there are back-to-back emails. There are real-time emails on financials, on employment, on taxation. So there are different divergent issues that will keep coming up. Now, if you are a multitasker, you know that it is difficult to multitask. And naturally, you have what we call as empathy. You are more sensitive, you are more understanding of why a particular thing happened. Your relationships with your colleagues tend to be influenced by what you have experienced. And with women, it's not easy. I will be very candid and honest. Despite all the awareness around equality of women lawyers in the legal profession, if you go to statistics, I always find statistics as very important thresholds of knowing what reality is. The number of judges at highest court, at high courts, at district level courts, the number of senior advocates on the bench, on the bar, the number of women managing partners, the number of women lawyers who are known in Legal 500 or Legal 100 or A-lists, it's still less. The number of general counsels. Now, why is it when we say that we are all empowered? Because the fact of the matter is that instead of a direct bias, there are more subtle forms of gender discrimination and bias that has taken place. And it affects at a deeper level. I think the only way that you can deal with that bias is not by getting out onto the street and doing a morcha. That's not what I will ever say. The way you can do is to continue to remain empathetic. That's a trump card. Women have the ability to give absolutely sound business advice, not because they're very good with numbers, but because they're empathetic. They can understand what their client is going through. If you start looking at a business problem as just a financial problem, you are not a trusted client advisor. That's my experience. You need to have that level of, you're almost like a counselor. Therefore, in fact, the name of my law firm is PSA Legal Counselors. Now, why are you a counselor? You're just not a person who is going to say, okay, these are the facts, this is the law, done. No, things do not work that way. You need to bring in a little bit of your empathy to that issue. If you bring in empathy, you will be in a way stronger position to explain your client that what are the risks, what are the advantages, what you're going to achieve, what you're not going to achieve. The moment you don't strike that connect, you're not empathetic, you're not understanding of their situation, and you look absolutely like cold and not related to their problem, it's their problem, I'm just going to give a legal advice, you've lost the battle. And increasingly, I have seen that women lawyers are bringing this internal quality, this inherent quality of being compassionate, being understanding, being accommodative to actually their strength. And this is a momentum that has to continue. So there is a wide perception, like you get mansplained. I'm sure, Talish, you must have been, Dr. Chandra, you must have been, like I have been mansplained. I'm talking about very recent times. Like people will cut through. You are speaking and people will cut through you and tell what they want to say. And that is a sense of entitlement that I don't tolerate at all. I have a fair share to say. You may disagree. We will agree to disagree, but you can't cut me. That's absolutely uncalled for. But as it may be, I have always put that point as an empathy issue in public gatherings. If I have been mansplained in a public gathering, actually I have stood up and said that, sorry, I wasn't done. If you please will bear with me, I really need another 2 minutes of your time. And there is this huge change in the way people perceive you. So what I'm going to tell you is that you will come across these stories as young lawyers that, oh, you have a good career, you're making good money, get married. One narrative. I am facing it. Let's be very honest about it. Number two, oh, you have a good career, you want to go abroad, study abroad, work for some years, come back, work here. That's again another sort of a picture. The third narrative, oh, you have done your law is a good subject, you want to be a civil servant, go ahead, do it. Now, what nobody tells you is that at every stage, you, by virtue of the fact that you are somebody who is a woman, will have certain other accompanying difficulties. You can only expect empathy from colleagues or from parents or from friends if you are empathetic. So throughout the process, do not ever become cutthroat. It never really helps anyone to be cutthroat. I don't know if you remember this, words are much more sharper than knives. So you don't really have to don't be taking out your clarion call and go to war. Pick your battles very intelligently. You need to save your energy. As Talish said, if they're long hours, don't expend your energy on things that do not matter. And this is just not clients or a dispute or an arbitration or how you're giving your advisory. I'm talking about things because what nobody prepares you in law school also is the interpersonal skill of being a lawyer. It is direct interface with people. It's like a doctor meeting a patient and the kind of empathy that you expect. It's just that here the nature of worry is a little different. It's not a health worry. It could be emotional, it could be financial, it could be criminal. There could be different dimensions, but there is definitely it is human interfacing, a profession which is deeply, heavily human interfacing, not just clients, your colleagues, your friends, your network. And remember one thing, that if you have a personality that is empathetic, trust me when I say this, people are not going to judge you to be weak. Over the course, you will only emerge stronger, and stick to that.
That was a wonderful take on this particular compassion, Arya, and thank you for that candid opinion and that mansplain point. And in fact, I was also thinking about, when I was thinking on this woman in law, one thought was that we should have a woman moderator, you know, for this particular session. I took a tough call and I thought that, no, let me do it, because my belief is that we coexist in this world, and we all have to go together. And it is about respecting each other and going ahead together. You know, these are two wheels of the chariot which move it going ahead, and that is how it will go ahead. And I think change is already citable. So we are able to see the change with great professionals in the field. However, you quoted the statistics, and thank you for bringing it out. And I wanted to speak on that statistics. And if I may be specific, and I can say the Supreme Court has had only 8 women judges in its history. And recently there are 2 women judges among the 31 judges. Justice R. Bhanumati recently retired.
Yes.
So I think it has to start from the top. And you know, the how maybe that is where is the majority lies. You know, thought process has to change from there. And I'm sure the present college will take a call on this, and there will be more women judges on the bench we will be able to see. And that makes a lot of difference. We have already talked about the qualities and the things out there. One interesting, while I was doing the study on this webinar, I was reading that there have been movement of, you know, 100 years of women in law, or in Oxford and Cambridge and all those places. And I was quite surprised to, and don't brand it or name it, because I was genuinely surprised to find that Cornelia Sorabji from India was the first woman to study law at Oxford. And she was also the first woman to graduate from the University of Bombay. And nowadays, we are pleased to see several women traveling abroad for their education and later also engage into the profession. So Dr. Gitanjali, you are based out in Dubai, and you see plenty of people coming out, going there. In fact, Dubai is an interconnection hub. So everybody traveling around the world actually takes a call there. So what is your opinion on this? And how do you see as to global landscape for women law practitioners? Before you begin your answer, I would also request that we will be closing the session soon, and with a last comment from the panelist, and that would be your advice to female aspirants who want to join the profession. So your piece of advice, or I say blessings, so because these are all young aspirants, and they have a lot of questions in their mind, you know, and obviously these blessings means a lot for them. So Dr. Gitanjali, over to you about the you know, international perspective of it, that how they can look at it as a career option, and as well as blessings. And then we have here the other 2 panelists on the blessings. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, sir. See, with the international perspective, whenever the students are interning, because I start my career with NGOs, so I always suggest there should be an internship, and internship is also a very important aspect of when we do all these things. So we will get the chance to explore new areas during our internship. That is very much important. It gives you insight. When I see my student studying in class, that's an international perspective. When you COVID give me the chance to give a application based question, which normally we don't give. So we try to give a theoretical question. So that's given me the chance to explore rest of the thing. and they have to think, they have to apply their mind. That's a Socrates way of learning pedagogy, one of the important aspects which have to be covered. And for international perspective, that is going to be very important, because see, concepts are all over the world. I don't find difficulty in teaching or taking a lecture on an Australian law or a Switzerland law. Concepts are the same. Might be the punishment or the section or the things are different, but otherwise the laws are same. If you see the see the system, common law system, civil law, like if you divide the word into this way, like divide the word into 4 big legal systems, so like you will find that almost Indian law has a beauty of they taught everything and every aspect to us that I am able, a student is able to understand. I just want to mention, I have a Sudanese student, I have Tanzanian student, and they are doing an Indian law. I have a Pakistani student, I have an Arabic student. I asked them, why you are taking admission for Indian law degree? So the thing is, there is so many other reasons for it. The most important one, which they never find it difficult, but when they compare, whenever we are giving assignment, we find they compare with their country. Like what are these provisions in their country? So this give me also insight for thinking of all this thing. And second thing is options. When I saw in my time, there is no sports law. So nowadays I saw the sports law is also evolving, that there is a humanitarian laws are as such not elaborated in that way what today we are studying. The immigration laws, the treaties and international aspect, trade related aspects or cyber related. These are some of the aspects which we always know in conventional government jobs, judiciary, or government department. And other than that, the private corporate, if someone is coming to us, we are saying, we want to be a corporate lawyer. So it's not like only think like you want to be a corporate lawyer. There are certain other trajectories like this. There are certain other access to it where you can explore. And the students from India are coming and they are doing very well in this part of the world, because you will find there is a multi-jurisdiction system over here in financial code. So different part of judges are coming, and there's I can see the people are working. Indians are working at 66% of the percentage of population here are in Dubai is Indians. So you can imagine that, and there's a large community of Indian lawyers over here. And nowadays, different treaties and tie-ups are there with the government, trade ties, extradition ties. There are a lot many ties with government, and we are actually, the cross-sectional laws are there. And the word, when we say Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, so word is actually globalized. So in the legal way also, the legal field also, there are certain maritime laws, there are certain practice areas, arbitration and all these things where you can practice, like forensic. I'm teaching in forensic. So the criminology I'm teaching, you can be a criminologist. You can have a lot option. You have to think technology lawyer, you are attorney. So there are so many areas you have to think. Otherwise I can say you have the ability, the student have the ability to bring a new position, bring a new law, bring new things. If I remember correctly, legal, women are not allowed. I was reading a history that women are not allowed for practice. Women are not allowed to practice initially in 1900, World War II, that like gave the chance to that like practice. And there's the same problem faced by Guha. So like these are some of the problems, and people are not people in the definition of General Clause Act person. Women are not included, but this is not the time. You can now, when they at that moment of time make the way to enter into the profession, so you are much resourceful. The students are much resourceful. They can think, they can imagine, they can install an app. They can, nowadays I saw, whenever I'm following the youngsters, they are making such kind of app. You can think, you can help. They are in community engagement. They think better. In community engagement, I always feel there should be a community engagement component should be into your course outline, because that make them empathy. They understand resilience for new generation. I must say the resilience, the empathy, these are some of the things they have to understand at core, and then only they can success in any profession. And legal profession is one of the things which makes you powerful, whether you opt as a litigating lawyer, whether you opt as a judge, whether you opt as a government officer. And as you said, for the blessing, I always want the young generation, and I always look forward to young generation, what they are bringing new things. and I'm ready to learn with the new student and get the chance to interact with them, that what things they can bring with our experience and with their technology, with their new things. We will actually club new things and bring and show the world India is actually a big power. Indian brain is for a, see, legal brain, which like legal brain of India, it's unmatchable with any other part of the world. So like it is something which you have to realize, you have to think this is the most powerful profession, most powerful, like any subject you can choose. Thank you. This from my side.
That's great, Dr. Gitanjali. Thanks a lot for that input, and you have summed it very well. And thanks for the blessings to our participants who are here. And some of the participants have asked that which is the best area, and I believe these are the questions. Best area has to be decided. As you saw, there is no best area. As you have heard all the three panelists, it completely depends on your taste and how do you begin, how do you think, and how do you plan your career. This is the way you can decide and envision that where you will land up, where you want to go, what is your ultimate goal. These are the certain things which will help you shape up your goal and decide a area of practice. What my experience says is that area of practice doesn't get decided at the initial stages. Once you start working, then you change your area of practice, and many a times you move into newer areas. And this is now a dynamic world. Agility is the key. It is very important for all of us to be agile and move forward with newer developments. Thank you, Dr. Gitanjali, for that particular input. I completely understand that globalization has picked up and international exposure means a lot for the students. And there has to be a mechanism which provides international exposure to the students. And I'm happy to report that at UPS, we provide that opportunity very often to our students. In fact, we have an MOU with the University of Law in London, UK. So that provides an opportunity of a semester exchange and that kind of activities. So this always provides an opportunity to the female students as well to move and go and experience the world as to as Ms. Talish has pointed out. Experiencing the things is very important, and that gives you the learning. So now I will move to our other panelists, Ms. Talish and Ms. Arya, for their parting comments as to what they would give the advice to female aspirants who want to join the profession.
So, Dr. Singh, I was also going through the questions as I, have been put in by the participants. And I think a lot of questions also deal with how do you become successful? And I have three parts to that answer, which I just would like to leave the participants as a thought process to. First is that, success is defined very differently by people. What to me was success in my 20s is not success in my 40s. So success is a shifting goal. So be very cautious about what you, or when you sort of tag yourself either successful or unsuccessful. And because we're only as successful as what we think we are. The second is a very serious advice, and that is to realize that life is a marathon. It's not a short sprint. It's not about what you do in a year, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. You can really look at your life only when you sit back in your 70s or 80s and then take a call on that. So it's, in that sense, a short sprint does not matter. In a short sprint, you can fall, you can sort of not do very well. What you have to do is that you have to be in the running every day. And with the running is actually one of my favorite quotes from a book which is written by Thomas Friedman. But he talks about, and he attributes as an African quote. He says, every morning in Africa, a gazelle wakes up. It knows it must run faster than the fastest lion or it will be killed. Every morning in Africa, a lion wakes up. It knows it must outrun the slowest gazelle or it will starve to death. It doesn't matter whether you're a lion or a gazelle. When the sun is up, you better start running. What it basically means is that, get up in the morning and make each moment count. When the sun is up, you should be running. It's not about distracting yourself. It is about putting in what you really want to go and get in life. And if you are going to go for it, there's no way that anybody can stop you. It's not about number of hours. If you can do it from sunrise to sunset, where you use every minute of the day, you're pretty much sorted for life.
Thank you. Thank you for that particular comment, parting comment. And it is quite interestingly you have put, when the sun rises, you have to run. And that is what is the key. And that is the mantra for everyone. And particularly the young generation, that should be the mantra. Arya.
I have actually a 4-pointer thing to say, and specifically because I'm aware that a lot of people either want to be attending law school or are in law school or are just about to step out of law school. First and foremost, lawyer 101, you have to be always willing to learn. There is no single day in your life that you say that I have learned enough or I have evolved and I have reached my peak. And from a law school perspective, look at law school as a boot camp. What you need to do at that boot camp is not just sit and memorize provisions. I will say that I have done that. I have enjoyed, actually memorizing the sequence of provisions. I was a nerd or a geek or whatever you call these kind of people. It's not about memorizing provisions. Oh, section 5 of this particular act says this. Nobody should be focused on that, because what you need to know, as I said, you have to be learning and evolving. And why? Because law keeps changing. Law is one piece of craft work, drafting work, artwork that is going to change, because law evolves organically. And therefore, if you want to be a lawyer, you need to be ready to evolve accordingly. So what you need to do then at law school is the boot camp, you need to understand how the law works. India is a common law jurisdiction. There are civil law jurisdictions. You need to get 100% grasp on how law works in these systems. You need to understand what is legal analysis. You also need to be focused about how you can present your ideas and solutions, either vocalizing it or putting it on a paper. That is two parts of it: drafting and communicating, or litigating or arguing. So do not just stick to getting a good grade point at law school and then a big fat paying job after law school, because it's all, as Talish said, it's all temporary. It has to evolve, and you will not be happy. Trust me, you will not be happy with the money that you're making if you are not in love with what you are doing. So you need to get your skill sets ready. And then comes my second point, which is stay open and be experimental. Do not just shy away that, oh, I have never done this and I don't know if I can do it, because you would never know if you can do it or not till you try it. And trust, there would be days when you feel like failure, that, oh, this is just such a silo, they're not doing anything momentary or achievable. But remember one thing, that a routine itself also is nurturing you as a lawyer, because if you lose out of your routine, doing the routine work, like I do routine on a routine basis, corporate work, right? If I lose out on that, I'm losing out on a lot of things, which is constantly nurturing my brain. That legal analysis improvises with the experience. Even if I may have done that 50 times, it's like making your favorite recipe. First time you make Maggie, it doesn't turn out well. The second time it turns out better. The third time it's brilliant. Fourth time you can set a shop and start selling it. So what I'm trying to say is remain open and experimental. The third thing that I want to tell you is, as women lawyers, learn how to prioritize. There will be times in your life where you will have to take tough calls between your profession and your personal space. Parents, spouse, relationships, career. These are going to always hound a woman more than a man. And Indian society is a little intolerant towards women who are career oriented. They are branded as ambitious, they are branded as egotistical, they are branded as feminazis, but they are not looked as career oriented women. So you have to learn how to prioritize. I'm not saying prioritize your career. Prioritize what works for you to live your life on a daily basis with absolute contentment, and learn how to say no. If you think it's not right, you're not meant for it, you should not ever accede to it. Learn to vocalize and say no, that is important. And the last thing, you have to constantly inspire yourself and make sure that you are in process inspiring every other woman lawyer that you meet. Because trust me, everybody doesn't have all the skills, but each one of us has some of the other skill sets. And above all, if you want to be a successful lawyer, you need to believe in the power of leadership and teamwork. So inspire yourself and inspire everyone that you meet along the way.
That's great, Arya. I think after hearing to this speech, no one can deny to join particular profession. So this is what I can say. It was wonderful, and you have given clarity of thought to the aspiring women leaders. And definitely, I believe either you choose law or not choose law, you should be aware about law, as Dr. Gitanjali pointed out. If you choose law, what there you will do is again your choice, which you have to craft it over a period. So there is no stereotype as to you cannot do this or you cannot do that. It is completely dependent on as to what is your liking, what is your take on it. And definitely saying no and putting forth your ideas is very important, because unless you put forth that thing on the table, people don't know. Many a times people have wrong assumptions about things.
Absolutely.
So this has to completely change. And very nice. It was a wonderful session. I can only say that it was very, very successful from the fact that we exceeded 24 minutes past the time which we scheduled for it. And I'm extremely thankful on behalf of UPS to Ms. Talishre, Ms. Arya Tripathi, and Dr. Gitanjali Chandra for joining us on this webinar. Looking forward to work with you ladies in future, in thought leaders, in many other assignments which we will do in our university. Looking forward to you. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.